So this next video aims to show you the real power and I suppose the real purpose of the NEAT analysis tool. So picking up at the stage after which we've filled in the online form, so we've input the basic details, we've received the email from the system telling us that the upload of this information is complete. Here you can see that Microsoft Outlook has finished scanning my Excel file because it's got macros in it, so it's done its security check and it's accessible. So as per the instructions in the email, we need to save our file in a location of our choice, or in this case it seems it's going to open it because I've double clicked. But not to worry. So the first thing we need to do is to enable the macros. Built within these sheets are a number of little macro processes, which just mean that through the sake of one click, Excel will perform a number of tasks for us without us having to go through each step individually. So we're going to enable that, and we're going to save somewhere appropriate. Because I'm an academic and I'm just using this temporarily, I'm going to put it on my desktop. And you can see that it will default to calling this the copy of the module workload modeling tool, and it will then add the suffix of the module code that we've given the module code that we've input. So I've called mine Echo 365, which was an attempt to use the name of the recording software that I'm using, but I think I've got it completely wrong in terms of name and number. Not to worry. So we'll save that. And then, as per, just flick back to my the email. So just to check our instructions here. So it's save the file locally, open the Excel sheet, and enable the macros. I've done this. So then, what we're invited to do is to move through each of the menu options in turn, and to use the processes that are within reach. So overall, we want to go to Assessment Overview to start with. Now the details that I've input for this video are different to the ones I input for the first video about inputting these details, but hopefully these are a bit more complicated. So pedagogically speaking, it's my view that when we're designing a module, once we've thought about our learning objectives and how we think we might create some learning opportunities around that, we quite early on start thinking about assessment. This means that I think we are much more likely to create something that's constructively aligned, where the learning objectives feed nicely as a student learning experience into the learning opportunities. There's clear coherence and connectivity there. And then something that often I think we get wrong is that the assessment accurately captures student learning towards those learning objectives. And I think, therefore, by thinking about assessment first, although it might seem quite counterintuitive to begin with, actually makes the most sense. And it's according to this principle that this reflective tool has been designed. So what you will see here is we've got our 4 places for assessment. You'll remember from the first video that actually this tool can't automatically deal with any more than 4 assessments. It can ultimately have more than 4 assessments, but this seems an unlikely function that people will want, and it just requires a bit of manual tinkering. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But if we can contain it to 4 assessments, that's preferable for the tool. What I've got here is I've got 2 assessments. I think this is hopefully relatively traditional. So I'm going to ask the students to write an essay and to do an exam. What I have input into my form is that 2 assessments, so this is 50%, and this adds up, hopefully following the cursor here to 100%. So this is right. Now in this next column, the next column is this kind of sandy red color. Now the sandy red color denotes cells that you shouldn't be able to input anything into. So this is the Excel spreadsheet doing its work in the background. Conversely, the green cells can be changed. So at this point, if I were to change my mind and say, actually, I want to have an exam 2 and I want to start changing the percentages of these assessments, I've got 2 assessments, so 50-50. I'm going to keep it with that. So going back to this next column, the Excel spreadsheet uses a static equation to make a suggestion as to how many student working hours you might ideally want to allocate to each of these assessments Given that this module is a 15 cap module operating in one term, so this draws upon a kind of an equation which is then built in with further assumptions from the wider literature. So if we were to say that in order to write the essay, the activities focused on demonstrating their learning, it would be reasonable to give the students 30 hours to do that. And that's obviously in addition to all the learning hours that they've had previous to that. As I think I mentioned in the first video, it's of course not a black and white thing. Learning hours bleed into preparing assessment hours. Students will still be learning things as they're preparing, they're researching and writing their essay. None of that is important apart from the fact that you as an individual have your own understanding of kind of how you're allocating these hours. So for me, this is all the time that the student will spend kind of dedicated to working towards the answering of an essay question. And that's the way that this number is generated from the literature and the assumptions. So the system here is suggesting that giving 30 hours for each assessment that's worth 50% of a 15 cap module makes some sort of sense. Now, in the following column here, the currently expected hours are the numbers of hours that I've input into the form that I'm kind of notionally thinking the student might spend on these activities. What this sheet is then inviting me to do is to reflect upon the pedagogical propriety of the assumptions that I'm making in terms of how the student will spend their time. And throughout the spreadsheet, you will see boxes that again are pre-populated with text, so this can't be edited, designed to provide kind of reflective stimuli, pointing out sort of some empirical truths about the way that your current plan is developing and asking some questions. So here it tells us that the planned hours are different from the standard ratio of assessment weight to hours of student preparation and completion time. And it's not telling me that, or telling you, or any of us, that this is wrong. It's merely asking us the question, are we happy with this? So we might, because the way we're in our own minds thinking about the difference between learning and like dedicated learning time and dedicated assessment time, we might be very happy with the fact that, the student, as far as my thinking goes, 10 hours is how much I'm going to plan for this. And 10 hours is what I'm going to tell to the students when I try to equip them to manage their time. Conversely, and I think potentially most likely, and I think if we're all honest, this is a product of not really having the foundational knowledge to think about this relationship, because this is something that the current systems in HE have not really equipped us to do. I don't think the fact we don't do this particularly well is our fault. We don't need to beat ourselves up about it. But I think what we do need to do now is to be kind of open-minded to thinking about this more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to say, actually, writing an essay in 10 hours, so that's thinking about an 8-hour day, that's a day and a half. Is it realistic to write an essay of what would the word length expected be here? So the system hasn't asked me for that information because it doesn't want to factor this in at this stage. But I'll know in my mind, say this is a 2,000-word essay, and I'm thinking this time is from basically the moment the student picks their questions, all the research they do towards answering that question, and writing an answer of 2,000 words. Is a day and a half really enough? And therefore actually is 11 hours in total towards preparing for assessment and successfully completing good assessment that captures learning authentically? Is that appropriate? And I'm going to reflect, and I'm going to say that's no. I'm going to actually accept this suggestion of 30 hours. And you can see here that the text has changed slightly. So it now says the planned hours fit a standard ratio of assessment, but it's still asking me, am I happy? So this is hopefully just reaffirming. This is not about saying your currently expected hours need to conform to what the spreadsheet suggests. It's a prompt for you to make an active, conscious, pedagogically informed decision. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that for the exam, I'm going to say, actually, I think 30 hours, so 30 hours, that's not quite a full week, would I expect a student to do less than a full week of revision? No. And I know the exam is going to be 2 hours long. So actually, I'm going to put 40 hours in here because I think that's more realistic. And so the message here then tells me that it's, this is different from the standard equation. Am I happy? And I'm going to say yes. The next column asks for the week of uni submission for this assessment. So when is the submission window going to close? And I think using the language of submission windows opening and closing can be more useful than talking about deadlines. Because I think instantly when we start telling students your deadline is, culturally, this implies that basically this is the day you hand it in. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but I think using this spreadsheet to plan to a much greater degree and to take more responsibility for helping the student understand how much work should be done for what activity and when, and the subtle change of language to empower the student. So we say this is the submission window. It opens then, it closes then. You can hand that essay in whenever you want, and it's just a subtle push in a direction that says, don't leave this till the last minute. You're not expected to be working on this until the last possible moment. You might want to plan around it. So uni week of submission. Here we've got a drop-down box. And the drop-down box gives us options throughout the academic year. So term 1, weeks 1 to 10. We've got winter recess. And then we've got term 2. And I've tried to capture the various different taxonomies, a nomenclature of labelling university weeks, right through to the summer recess if we're thinking about master's students. Now, because I know this is a term 1 module, or I'm going to imagine it's a term 1 module, I'm going to say that I want the essay submitted term 1, week 10. It's going to be on the Friday. And the exam, I'm going to say a fairly traditional model might be to say, so not the winter recess, term 2, week 1. So in other terms, maybe week 15 of the university term. So here I've now completed this particular worksheet, and I can go return to the main menu. So far, so good. Adding just a little bit of extra detail to help the major analysis, which is what happens next. And hopefully, well, actually, no, I'm not hopefully. I'm going to be realistic. When I open this next window, if you're still watching this video, you're going to be overwhelmed by what's on the screen. I think this is hopefully because my ability to create an ergonomically designed front end for people to engage with is limited. But I hope if you're happy to persist and to listen to the logic and the explanation and see the functionality, I think very quickly you'll start to agree that this is very powerful and worth using in this form, or possibly in a much improved form, in order to help us plan our learning opportunities and our modules more effectively. So let's go for it. Let's see how terrifying you find this. Oh God! Oh no, maybe it's not so bad as I was thinking, or maybe it is. Who knows? So up at the top here, we've got some buttons. Each one of these buttons runs a macro, which means that we have to do less kind of processing, and I'll come back to these in a moment. Next, we have overall comments for reflection, and immediately. So I've been a bit more advanced here. I've tried to color code the background. So when all these boxes are green, the system is suggesting that our reflections have reached a stage that makes quite a good deal of sense. It's not the right answer, it's not perfect, but makes a good deal of sense. And here you can see some initial bits of information that we're provided with. So the overall status of our module. So we're told in this first box that the module requires 150 notional education assessment. What does NEET stand for? I've forgotten. Notional education and assessment time hours. So notional learning hours might be another way of expressing this, or hours the student needs to put in to complete the work and the assessment in the module. So it's a 15 CAT module. We're familiar with that. Should equate 10 hours at Warwick for every CAT, so 150 hours we should be planning. And if we're not planning, 150 hours, we have to ask ourselves to what degree we're really doing our job as an effective educational designer. And I think largely we're not really doing our job well enough. Again, not because we're bad people, but because the system, the HE system in general, has not been very equipped at helping us do this well. This is a broad systemic problem, but I'm hoping that we can lead the way in much better practice. Anyway, I digress. So the module requires 150 hours, and you've currently scheduled 0 hours. That's basically pointing out that the schedule, which I'm about to show you, has no hours input into it. And then there is a bit of a qualitative description. So there's an insufficient number of hours planned for the module's cat waiting, and then it's prompting us to have a reflective thought. So can we identify where these hours should be added? And what does it say there? So increasing time plan for learning opportunities and assessment. So basically it's saying us at this point, the message says you haven't made a start. So it's yellow. And so on and so forth. The sort of the overall comments are then broken down into teaching hours. And this is probably useful to say. So because of what we've said in terms of the time we expect students to dedicate to assessment, I forget what the sum was. Oh no, it says here, are 80 hours, so for the essay and for the exam. And we've currently scheduled none of that time, so that needs working on. And the qualitative message kind of supports that. I've got it back to front. Sorry, that's why I was initially stumbling. So this is teaching hours. So after we've planned the assessment hours, which total 70, none of which we've scheduled, we're left with 80 hours out of the 150, none of which we've scheduled. So this, again, basically says you haven't done anything, which is all fine. The last kind of overall comment box is about distribution. And this is about how the hours of expected student work are distributed across the weeks of the degree. And we'll come back to this because this is the key part of what this tool tries to help us with. So if you're not overwhelmed at this point, fantastic. Let's see if I can push you to the boundary of your comfort by showing you this bit.